The shuttle door hissed as it opened, letting in a blast of warm, humid air. Thick vines hung like serpents from the canopy overhead, and the buzzing of artificial insects filled the air. The simulation dome, known as Trial Zone Theta 6, was a perfect replica of a jungle ecosystem, except it wasn't real. Every tree, every bird call, even the sweat running down the backs of the cadets' necks was orchestrated by the Academy's environmental systems. But it didn't matter. In here, reality was what you responded to. Survival was all that counted. Riley stepped off the platform last. Her boots sank slightly into the damp soil as she looked around. Alien cadets from across the galaxy were already gathering in tight clusters, scanning the terrain, adjusting their cloaking modules, checking the integrity of their armor. Some had bodies covered in scales or exoskeletons, others shimmered with bioluminescent skin. Riley looked almost disappointingly plain among them, small, human, unarmed, and wearing simple reinforced fabric. No armor, no nanotech. A deep, mechanical voice echoed through the trees. Cadets, your objective is to avoid detection for 48 Earth hours. You will be hunted by aerial and ground units designed to adapt to standard tactics. If you are detected, you are eliminated. Begin in 5 minutes. The announcement ended with a dull pulse from each cadet's collar tag. The simulation had begun. Beside her, a Zephyrian cadet, slender and silver-skinned, turned with a smirk. You're not even activating a stealth field? That fabric won't hide you from anything. Riley didn't respond. She crouched down instead and touched the mud with her fingers. It was thick, warm, sticky, the kind that clung to skin and dried into crust. She rolled up her sleeves and dipped both hands into it, scooping large handfuls and beginning to smear it across her arms, her face, her neck. The aliens around her stared, some laughing, some blinking in confusion. "You know this isn't a children's game, right?" muttered a gruff voice. It belonged to Korn, a massive scaled cadet from the mountain species Dracarul. He wore adaptive reactive armor and a tri-layered cloak system. Mud won't help you. Sensors track heat, motion, infrared. Riley glanced up at him, her eyes calm and focused. "Exactly," she said softly. Then she smeared a thick layer of mud across her face until her pale skin vanished beneath the natural paint. The others dispersed quickly. Everyone had their strategies. Some ran straight into the jungle, using their species' natural agility or speed. Others deployed personal drones to scout ahead, mapping optimal hiding zones. Several activated shimmer fields, bending light around their bodies as they seemed to vanish into the leaves. Riley didn't move. She watched them go, listened to the sound of snapping branches and rustling foliage fading into the distance. Then she knelt fully, scooping more mud into a pouch at her side. She tore off several broad leaves from a nearby tree, crushed them in her hands, and rubbed the juices into her arms. The mixture was sticky and pungent, but she knew the scent would help her blend with the jungle's background odors. Her fingers worked quickly, tying thin vines around her wrists, ankles, and shoulders. Not tight, but enough to break up her outline if seen from a distance. She finally stepped into the trees, not with haste, but with precision. Every footstep was placed after thought. No snapping of twigs, no sudden movements. She kept low, occasionally pausing to crouch and listen. Every few minutes, she stopped entirely to become a part of the environment. This was not about speed, it was about disappearing. Back at the launch point, the instructors in the control center watched with mild amusement. "Human Cadet Riley," one of them said, pulling up a data window. "No visual camo. No electronic support. Primitive concealment. She'll be out within 6 hours." But one of the observers, a veteran named Captain Vurak, didn't laugh. He zoomed in on Riley's position, then activated the drone's sensor suite. No movement signature, no heat lock either. "That can't be right," said another instructor, adjusting the feed. "We just watched her walk through the brush. That jungle is full of drones. They should have flagged her already." Vurak narrowed his eyes. "Let's wait and see." Meanwhile, deeper in the simulation, Riley found a small depression near a fallen log. It was the perfect hiding spot. She lay down slowly, dragging debris across her body, loose leaves, sticks, and a thin layer of dirt. She reached into her pouch and pulled out more mud, reinforcing her face and neck, making sure no skin shone. Then she lay still. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. A drone buzzed overhead. Its sleek, disc-like shape hovered in silence, scanning with its multispectral eyes. It passed by once, then circled back. Riley didn't move. The drone paused. Its sensor array flickered for a moment as if confused. Heat signature, undetectable. Movement, none. Biological signal, low. It drifted away. Inside the control room, alerts were popping up. Cadets Hulek, Vrano, and Sutok eliminated. Heat trace detected, pursued and tagged. And Riley? Human Cadet Riley. No detection. The instructor frowned. Her profile didn't suggest advanced fieldcraft. Captain Vorok smirked. That's not fieldcraft. That's instinct. That's a human who's been in the woods before. As evening approached, the jungle changed. Simulated fog crept in. Moisture dripped from branches. Strange synthetic birds let out haunting calls. In the distance, the cries of cadets being hunted echoed through the foliage. Some tried to run. Some tried to fight back. Few succeeded. Riley crawled out from her hiding place after several hours of stillness. She moved like an animal, close to the ground, quiet, slow. She found a small stream, washed off the top layer of mud to cool her skin, then reapplied a fresh coat. She paused only to gather more leaves and tuck them under her shirt to act as padding. Night fell, and the jungle turned dark. But for Riley, this was the comfortable part. She had spent nights in the wild back on Earth, camping with her father, learning how to move without being seen, how to listen to the wind for changes in direction, how to hear something long before it saw her. The alien cadets had never experienced that. They had trained in sterilized domes, memorized diagrams, and depended on algorithms. Riley trusted the mud, the stillness, the instincts that came from a planet where humans had survived predators with nothing but sharp sticks and willpower. She looked up at the false moon above the simulation dome, then disappeared beneath the trees once more, completely silent, unseen, and entirely unafraid. The first elimination alert rang through the simulation dome just after the 10th hour. A dull chime echoed faintly above the treetops, too subtle to disorient, but loud enough to remind every remaining cadet that someone had failed. Then another, and another. Within 20 minutes, 5 cadets were out, eliminated by the same machines they had trained to outsmart. The jungle, though simulated, had begun to turn on them. Riley didn't flinch when the alert sounded. She was wedged in a wedge-shaped alcove formed by 2 massive roots and a tangle of fallen vines. Her entire body was coated again in a thick, rehydrated mix of mud, plant pulp, and crushed bark. With her face buried in a shallow bed of moss, she barely breathed, inhaling slow, measured drafts through a thin, hollow reed she had carved with a stone chip earlier that morning. She had not moved in over 40 minutes. A low-frequency pulse hummed nearby. She recognized the subtle whine of a ground-tracking drone. Unlike the overhead scouts, this one scanned under foliage and used pressure sensors to detect unnatural displacement of soil. It glided past her on magnetic runners, silent except for the minute electrical hum of its energy core. It paused near her hiding place, pulsing in a slow rhythm, then rotated. For a moment, its scanning arc bathed the moss where her back curved against the root. The scanner flickered, recalibrated, then dismissed the signature. The drone continued its patrol, leaving a trail of disturbed leaves and twitching insects in its wake. Elsewhere, the jungle was less forgiving. Korn, the Dracarul cadet who had mocked her earlier, sprinted through the underbrush, panting heavily. His triple-layer cloak emitted faint distortion waves, bending light around his thick, muscular frame, but the effect was starting to fail. The humidity interfered with his suit's thermal regulators. With each step, tiny fluctuations in temperature left vapor trails in the infrared spectrum. The drones followed, not because of sound or movement, but because he was too warm. He activated a burst decoy, a small pod that shot high into the canopy and released a flare of electromagnetic noise meant to confuse the trackers. It worked, for 6 seconds. Then a ground drone leapt from behind a bush, wrapped metal restraints around his legs, and fired a tranquilizing pulse into his side. Korn grunted once and collapsed into the moss, the elimination collar around his neck flashing red. In the control room above the dome, one of the instructors tapped on his console. Cadet Korn eliminated, 6th in the last hour. Cloak failure due to microclimate saturation. Captain Vurok folded his arms. All the tech in the galaxy doesn't mean a thing when the environment turns on you. You train soldiers, not machines. Another instructor leaned forward. We have another anomaly, he said, enlarging a data feed. Human Cadet Riley. No visible movement in the last hour and a half. She hasn't used any issued equipment. No sign of distress. No biometric fluctuations. Is the feed jammed? No. She's just gone. Gone? Vurok raised a brow. You mean invisible? She's not triggering anything, the analyst said. No thermal, no pressure, no optical trace. It's like she stopped existing. Vurok said nothing. He tapped a finger once against his chin and stared at the map. The jungle was riddled with blinking red dots, indicating eliminated cadets. But one small gray icon remained steady in a dense section of foliage. No movement, no change, just quiet, calculated stillness. Inside the dome, Riley finally opened her eyes. Her vision was blurry from the moisture in the moss, and her skin itched from insect bites and sap burns, but she didn't scratch. She had learned long ago that discomfort was just a message. She had the choice to ignore it. She slowly turned her head, moving no more than a few degrees. In the canopy above, the last of the sun-like simulation lights dimmed, casting the jungle into an eerie green twilight. Birds, the synthetic kind with metallic wings and glowing eyes, screeched in response. The predators would be more active now. She needed to move. Not far, just enough to find a new hide site and keep the pattern irregular. She slithered forward on her belly, pulling herself inch by inch with her forearms, legs trailing silently behind. She avoided roots, stepping over them with the same slow precision she'd used to teach children how to cross cold rivers back home. Every 10 feet, she paused, listened, waited. The jungle became stranger after dark. The sounds changed. The synthetic wildlife grew louder, more chaotic. Mechanical predators roamed in programmed circuits, emitting false animal calls and searching for fast-moving targets. Riley avoided them by pattern recognition. The fake animals had a rhythm. So did the drones. She moved only between pulses, only when she knew she had a window of stillness in the system's breath. She passed a clearing where another cadet had tried to set up a thermal shield between 2 trees. The remains of the shield were scattered across the ground, shredded by metallic claws. The cadet, an amphibious alien with skin like wet glass, lay unconscious beside it, limbs limp, elimination collar glowing faintly in the darkness. Riley crouched beside the wreckage. The tech didn't interest her, but the terrain did. This clearing was dangerous, too exposed, too obvious. She collected a few sharp stones, tucked them into her pocket, and moved on. She reached a thicket of brush and pushed her way inside. The space was cramped but hidden. Above, a twisted web of vines covered the sky. Below, damp soil muffled every sound. She dug with her hands, quietly and efficiently, until she had formed a shallow trench just large enough for her body. She lay in it, coated herself again with debris, and rested. 10 minutes passed, then 15. A small drone swept across the canopy and paused. Her body was entirely still. The drone rotated once, then hovered for nearly a minute. Its sensors brushed the undergrowth, brushing past her form, but never registering it. The mud on her body cooled her skin. The leaves masked her scent. The trench muted her heat signature. She wasn't there, not to the machines. The drone eventually continued its route. Far above, in the observation tower, a technician whispered, "I think the jungle thinks she belongs." Captain Vorok didn't answer. He leaned in, watching, a quiet smile forming on his face. As the second night closed in, the simulation grew more aggressive. Drones flew lower. Predators adjusted their scans. Pressure sensors embedded in the soil recalibrated to catch prone bodies. Yet Riley was never where the machines expected her to be. She moved like a memory, always just before detection, always just behind the line of sight. And by midnight, the alerts came slower. Fewer cadets remained. Riley didn't celebrate. She lay flat beneath a veil of green and brown, her mind attuned not to victory, but to survival. She wasn't trying to win. She was trying to become invisible. And it was working. The false moonlight above the dome dimmed to a dull shimmer, and the air thickened with artificial mist, released through concealed nozzles in the trees. Visibility dropped to barely a few meters, and the temperature plunged sharply. Condensation gathered on leaves, dripping in irregular patterns that echoed like distant footsteps. For a brief moment, the jungle simulation stood silent, as if the entire dome were holding its breath. Riley stirred. She had not slept. There was no time to sleep. Not truly. She had dozed in microbursts, allowing herself just enough time for the mind to reset while the body remained motionless, always alert. Her trench had become tighter overnight as soil settled around her. Her limbs ached, her skin itched beneath dried layers of mud and bark, and her fingertips were raw from crawling over rough terrain. But she didn't move until she was ready. When she emerged, she did so like an animal emerging from the earth. First her head, then her shoulders, slow and deliberate, as if her body were not something separate from the jungle, but an extension of it. She carried no tools, no technology, only instinct and fragments of the environment pressed into service as camouflage. A coil of vine dangled from her belt. Her hair, matted and crusted with sap, was tucked beneath a layer of moss. She had spent enough time hiding. It was time to become something more than unseen. It was time to become untouchable. She began by ascending. The trees in this section of the dome were wide-trunked and covered in hanging moss. Riley chose one at the edge of a ravine where predator drones rarely patrolled due to canopy interference. She climbed using natural knots, digging her fingers into cracks in the bark, spreading her weight carefully. She moved like a sloth, inching upward until she reached a heavy horizontal branch thick enough to hold her body. From here, she had a clear view across the upper canopy. Through the mist, she could barely make out the shifting shapes of heat-seeking drones. Their scanning lights created sweeping arcs of dull blue through the trees. Below, the brush rustled with the quiet, artificial breath of quadrupedal hunters, machines built to mimic predators from across the galaxy. Some resembled panthers, others bore the form of wolf-like creatures with flexible alloy joints and reactive armor. All were silent killers. She didn't fear them. She observed. Each drone followed patterns. Their paths were algorithmic, designed for unpredictability, but not truly random. Riley began to count seconds between scans, tracing the arcs, listening for the low hum of repulsor fields powering their movement. She noted which machines favored denser foliage, which patrolled open paths, and which paused to investigate heat spikes. Then she mapped their behavior into memory. The jungle was no longer her enemy. It was her training ground. She moved from tree to tree, remaining high above the ground, stepping with absolute control. She never allowed a branch to bend under her weight, never brushed against loose leaves. When she descended again, it was because she had seen something worth investigating. In the undergrowth ahead, one cadet, Zathor from the planet Ulzar, was pinned behind a fallen log. He was tall and skeletal, with crystalline skin that pulsed with faint energy in the dark. His suit shimmered weakly, and his breathing was ragged. His visor flickered with static, and his hands trembled as he checked a small field scanner in his palm. He hadn't noticed the drone circling above. Riley crouched 20 meters away, obscured by ferns. She could hear the whine of the aerial unit slowly tightening its pattern, sweeping closer to his position with every pass. Zythor shifted, preparing to move, but his left foot was caught in a snare of roots. If he twisted free, the noise would be enough to trigger a pursuit protocol. She knew what was coming. The scanner pulsed once. Zythor hesitated. Then he pulled his foot hard. The roots snapped with a wet pop. The sound, amplified in the quiet mist, was like a gunshot. The drone accelerated, its blue scan light zeroing in. Riley didn't think. She moved. She reached into her pouch, pulled a stone she had sharpened earlier, and flung it at a distant branch. The impact cracked loud, redirecting the drone's focus. It spun mid-air, scanning the source. While it turned, Riley crawled forward, pressed her hand over Zythor's mouth, and pulled him backward into the ferns. His eyes widened, his body rigid. She held him still as the drone hovered above, unable to distinguish the two prone figures from the debris around them. After a tense 30 seconds, the drone drifted away. Zythor exhaled shakily. "You're the human," he whispered. She gave a slight nod but said nothing. He stared at her mud-caked face, her layered leaves, her moss-covered shoulders. How are you not eliminated?" Riley pointed to the jungle. Zythor followed her gesture but saw nothing. "You mean, you live like the jungle?" She tilted her head slightly. Then she pressed a finger to her lips, signaling silence. The conversation was over. She left him behind. Not out of malice, but because she had no interest in explaining herself. Her focus was survival, not diplomacy. Zythor would survive because she had intervened, but she would not carry him. She climbed again, this time higher than before, finding a tree whose branches interwove with others like a net. From this height, the simulation became a layered machine. Drones on the top, predators in the middle, desperate cadets below. Only she existed between the levels, outside the systems. Becoming the jungle was not a metaphor. She had trained herself to move with its logic. Where it shifted, she shifted. Where it paused, she paused. She no longer reacted to the machines. She anticipated them. At dusk, the mist grew darker, tinged with synthetic pollen that glowed faintly in ultraviolet. It was designed to cling to cadets and betray their movement. Riley saw the traps. She recognized the specific trees releasing the pollen and avoided them. Others weren't so careful. 2 more cadets were eliminated before midnight. Zythor, somehow, was not. She spotted him once again beneath a tree, mimicking her earlier strategy, covering his body in leaves. It was a crude attempt, but he had learned. That much she respected. The next challenge came without warning. A new drone type entered the simulation, one she hadn't seen before. It flew lower, slower, scanning not for movement or heat, but for biological rhythm. Heartbeats. Riley had to adapt. She found a pocket of water collected in a hollow root and submerged her upper body, leaving only her nostrils exposed through reeds. She slowed her breathing to 3-second intervals. Her heartbeat was already low from exhaustion, but she forced it lower, counting between thumps, focusing her mind on stillness. The drone passed overhead, hesitated, then continued. She remained in the water for an hour. When she emerged, night had fully swallowed the dome. The only light came from the occasional flicker of distant drones and the bioluminescence of alien flora. She felt no fear, only clarity. In the control tower, Captain Vurak stood alone now, the others having left to update command. He watched the live feed in silence. A junior technician walked in. "Sir, why are you still monitoring?" "Because," Vurak said, "this is the first time in 15 years I've seen someone not just survive the trial, but tame it." He leaned closer to the display. "She isn't hiding from the jungle anymore." She's leading it. By the time the final cycle began, the jungle simulation had turned predatory. The artificial sun never rose. The sky above the dome remained dim and veiled in smoky gray. The environment adjusted to extreme difficulty mode. Temperature drops, heightened humidity, and increased drone aggression. Most of the remaining cadets had already been flushed out, tagged, and extracted by the aerial units. Only 2 signals remained unclaimed. 2 fading pulses on the instructor's master panel, barely distinguishable in the data clutter. One was from Zethor, whose energy readings were unstable and spiking erratically. The other was from Riley, whose vitals were so low and consistent that several technicians assumed her collar had malfunctioned. She was very much alive. Nestled between the exposed roots of a colossal tree, Riley kept her eyes closed and her body completely still. She had been buried beneath a thick layer of rotting leaves for over 2 hours, and the scent of decomposition clung to her like armor. Her pulse had slowed to a rate only just above dangerous. Her breath passed silently through a straw made from peeled bark, and the mud on her skin had long since dried into a hardened shell. Even insects avoided her now, unable to distinguish her from the forest floor. She waited. The sky vibrated with the low buzz of a drone cluster. 3 units flew in tight formation, weaving beneath the canopy like vultures circling a dying animal. They moved differently now, less robotic, more reactive. The AI that controlled the dome had switched from passive monitoring to full pursuit mode. It knew the simulation was nearing completion, and it wanted to crush the final cadets before time ran out. One of the drones paused directly above her hiding spot. Riley felt the faint warmth of its scanning field press against the air around her like invisible fingers reaching for her heartbeat. Her lungs burned, but she didn't move. A single gasp could mean the end. The drone hesitated. It made a low, chittering noise, then ascended, joining the others as they spiraled upward and vanished behind the mist-veiled branches. The moment passed, and her muscles unclenched with mechanical precision. She knew she couldn't rely on hiding forever. The jungle was changing. The machines had begun adapting not just to movement or heat, but to environmental irregularities. Anything unnatural could become a beacon. She had to keep moving, but even movement had to evolve. She crawled through a narrow tunnel beneath a fallen log, her body flat to the ground, dragging a length of vine behind her to erase her trail. Each movement was a calculation, each step part of a larger pattern of silence. The mud on her face cracked with each facial twitch, but she ignored the discomfort. Hours passed without sunlight. In the simulated world of Theta 6, time was kept not by clocks, but by tension, and Riley felt that tension growing. She approached a narrow stream that ran across the jungle floor, glowing faintly blue from embedded mineral sensors. On the other side of the water, Zethor lay under a collection of branches, his long limbs tangled in desperation, his once bright skin now dulled and cracked. He looked like he had not slept. His eyes darted from shadow to shadow, and his breathing was fast and uneven. A low-frequency buzz approached. Riley darted forward, grabbing a broken chunk of bark, and flattened herself behind a log. Across the stream, a drone swept toward Zethor's position. He tried to roll away, but his foot caught on a root, and the sound of tearing plant fiber echoed sharply. The drone changed direction instantly. He raised his hands, trying to activate his personal stealth field, but the device only flickered, dead from overuse. The drone fired a small net of stasis threads. Zethor's scream was short and cut off halfway by the neural pulse. His signal vanished from the instructor panel. Riley didn't move. She watched as the drone hovered over his limp body, scanned for confirmation, and then flew off with unsettling calm. The jungle swallowed the moment as if it had never happened. Now she was alone, the only cadet left. Her stomach growled quietly. She hadn't eaten in over 24 hours, and her body was beginning to betray her. She ignored the hunger. Her focus narrowed. Her goal wasn't food. It was outlasting the dome. In the upper chamber of the control tower, A different kind of silence hung in the air. Captain Vurok stood alone, watching the feed with a mixture of curiosity and awe. "She's adapting faster than the system," he muttered, almost to himself. "No equipment, no enhancement, just awareness." The final stage of the simulation activated. An alert chimed, and the central AI deployed 2 final drones, black-shelled interceptors, larger than the previous units, equipped with heat distortion vision, air pressure sensors, and limb recognition protocols. These weren't just tracking machines. They were designed to corner. Riley heard them before she saw them. Their wings hummed with a deeper pitch, and the air around them crackled faintly with static. She crouched beneath a tangle of vines and drew her limbs close, coating her hands again in thick mud. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Every cell in her body ached. The first drone swept through the trees ahead, casting a wide beam of blue light. She dropped flat behind a fallen tree, pressed her face into wet moss, and held her breath. The drone paused. Its scan passed directly over her. Then it moved on. She didn't exhale until the second unit passed by on a parallel path. Both drones began to crisscross, sweeping wider arcs. The AI had begun a funnel pattern, pushing her toward a kill zone. It had used this tactic before on previous trials. She would not be funneled. She doubled back. Instead of running away from the drones, she ran into their pattern, circling behind their arcs, reversing her direction each time they widened their field. She moved like water slipping between rocks, never resisting force, always shifting around it. She led the drones in circles for an hour, gradually steering them away from her shelter. Then she stopped. She crouched in the shadow of a split boulder, took a length of vine, and began weaving a net, not to trap anything, but to create a decoy. She molded the leaves and sticks into the rough shape of a curled body, then placed a heated rock beneath the moss to mimic a faint warmth. She covered it in mud, just enough to resemble skin, and then she left. The drones found it 20 minutes later. They circled above the decoy, scanned, and launched a pulse. The moss ignited, burning through the false shape. No signal vanished. No collar blinked out. The AI paused. The drones hovered, confused. Riley was already 100 meters away, curled beneath a hollowed log, unmoving. And then, finally, a tone sounded. The sky shifted from gray to a faint golden hue. The temperature began to rise. The drones withdrew, rising into the mist, vanishing like birds returning to roost. A slow chime echoed through the jungle. Trial complete. Riley didn't rise immediately. She waited for the confirmation pulse from her collar. Only when she heard the release hiss and felt the warmth of the deactivation circuit fade from her neck did she sit up. Her body was shaking. Her muscles throbbed from cold and hunger. Her face was crusted with dried mud, and her lips were cracked and bleeding. But her eyes were calm. She had done it. Alone. The golden light filtered through the leaves like the breath of something ancient and kind. For the first time in 2 days, the simulated sky above the dome no longer loomed heavy with mist and shadows. The false sun hung in stillness, and the air felt softer, warmer, like a final gesture of mercy from the cruel machine that had ruled this jungle for so long. Riley remained crouched beside the log, eyes open, but unmoving. Her ears strained to hear the smallest changes. She trusted nothing, not even silence. The simulation was over, yes. The drones had withdrawn, and her collar had hissed its release. But trust, in this place, was earned by nothing less than proof. A soft click echoed through the trees, followed by the low hum of stabilizer pads engaging. From the east, a retrieval pod descended between the trees, flanked by 2 neutral scout drones emitting non-lethal scan pulses. The pod's lights glowed green. Extraction confirmed. She didn't rise. Not yet. She waited for the drones to approach, and only when their scans passed over her without activating a single protocol did she begin to stretch her limbs. Her joints popped as she moved, and her muscles cried out, stiff and brittle after too long in survival mode. She stood slowly, dirt and bark tumbling from her back in chunks. Her hands trembled, and her legs felt hollow beneath her. But she walked. She moved toward the pod, one foot in front of the other, each step quiet, unhurried. She did not march like a victor. She returned like a survivor. As she reached the clearing where the pod had landed, two technicians stepped forward, both human, both dressed in sealed suits that contrasted harshly with her raw, weathered form. They looked at her, stunned, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. She looked like a creature dragged from myth, skin painted in hardened mud, leaves tangled in her hair, face marked by insect bites and sun scalds. But her eyes were clear, steady, and entirely unafraid. The taller technician swallowed before speaking. "Cadet Riley. Simulation Theta 6. Complete." She nodded once. "Please step into the decontamination chamber. Medical will evaluate." "I'm not injured," she said, her voice rasping like dry leaves crushed underfoot. "Yes, but protocol—" She walked past him, stepped into the pod, and sat on the bench near the back. She didn't look around. She stared ahead. The door hissed shut behind her. High above in the observation deck, Captain Vurok stood alone, hands behind his back. The other instructors had returned hours ago after dismissing the simulation as a standard exercise with predictable results. None of them had expected what had happened. Only he had stayed. Now he watched the replay footage, dozens of hours compressed into one fluid stream. Riley crawling through the vines, pressing her face into the mud, timing her movements to drone patterns, weaving decoys, using nothing but instinct and ancient tactics. He tapped a command into the console and brought up her performance file. The statistics were anomalous. 0 drone detections, 0 predator engagements, 0 use of issued tech. Her file glitched twice trying to reconcile her heart rate data with her movement logs. He smiled. Downstairs, the pod docked with the exterior corridor of the Academy's main complex. Riley stepped out under the sterile white lights of the processing bay. Several medical officers waited, but none of them moved forward. She looked out of place here, as if nature had followed her into the clean halls of civilization. She carried the jungle in the mud on her clothes, in the dried blood under her fingernails, in the way her shoulders never relaxed, and in the silence she wore like a cloak. She said nothing as she was guided through debrief. In the post-simulation chamber, instructors reviewed the footage with the remaining cadets. Zithor sat among them, pale but conscious again. He watched the footage with a mix of admiration and something close to guilt. He had survived because of her intervention. Everyone in the room knew it. He said nothing. The lead instructor cleared his throat and gestured to the screen. "This is Cadet Riley. She used no equipment, no drones, no stealth fields. And yet, she completed the simulation with a perfect non-detection record." One cadet murmured, "How?" "She used the environment," the instructor said. "She relied on camouflage, biological masking, and predator avoidance patterns derived from Earth wilderness survival techniques. Primitive, but effective." Another cadet scoffed. "That wasn't strategy. That was animal behavior." Captain Vurok entered the room. Everyone stood. He motioned for them to sit, then walked to the front of the chamber. His uniform bore no medals. He didn't need them. "She wasn't an animal," he said. "She was the only one who understood the point of the test." Silence fell. He turned to the cadets. "You thought the jungle was the enemy. You used technology to fight it. You tried to dominate it, outrun it, outthink it. She became part of it. She studied it, moved with it, slept in its heartbeat. When the drones searched for cadets, the jungle hid her. Not because she was clever, because she respected it. And that's what saved her." No one responded. Vurok looked around the room, then tapped the console. Riley's final movement through the dome replayed. Her slow rise from the trench, the path she walked toward extraction. Quiet, measured, dignified. She didn't survive because she was lucky, he said. She survived because she knew when to vanish, when to strike, and when to wait. He turned off the screen. Let that be the last lesson. Later that evening, Riley stood alone in the Academy's outdoor atrium. The artificial sky above shimmered with soft purple hues as light from distant stars filtered through the atmosphere dome. Her skin was clean now, her uniform replaced, her collar gone. But her posture hadn't changed. Her gaze remained alert, focused, not anxious, but vigilant. Zithor approached quietly, keeping a respectful distance. She turned slightly. "I never thanked you," he said. "You don't need to," she replied. "I would have failed without you." "Yes." He nodded once, then added, "You're not like the others." She didn't respond. He stood silently beside her for a moment, then walked away. She remained still. The jungle was gone, but it had left something behind, something inside her. In the days that followed, her performance became a point of debate across the Academy. Some dismissed it as a fluke, others hailed it as revolutionary. A few quietly studied the footage and revised their training methods. But none could erase what she had done. She had passed the simulation not by resisting the environment, but by dissolving into it. She had shown that survival was not about dominance or firepower, but about listening to the world and letting it teach her. She had become a whisper in the leaves. And when the system had searched for her, the jungle itself had replied, "She's not here." Riley stepped forward beneath the stars. No longer a cadet, now a legend.